Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Chertsey Park by J Bellamy. Narrated by Esther Wane. An evening's entertainment. Britons drive on the left. This is a well-known fact. However, when approaching the entrance of the Savoy, the law of the land has been set aside. Turning off the Strand and onto Savoy Court, which is private property, all vehicles must drive on the right. This regulation-ousting convention, undergirded by a special Act of Parliament, was born out of the economical habits of bygone hackney carriage drivers. Instead of getting down and doing a proper job of opening the door for his passengers, the cabby, remaining seated on his perch, reached back for the handle and, without inconveniencing himself any more than strictly necessary, unlatched the right-hand door. A motorized cab turned onto Savoy Court, and, at the halfway point of the tight turning circle, it came to a stop. The doorman opened the passenger's door. Sophie alighted, immediately followed by St. John Yardley, who, quick to join her, was wearing a long, immaculate black coat, with a white silk scarf and a faultless topper. Sophie stood on the pavement and gazed, awestruck, taking in the distinguished entrance to the legendary establishment. So many famous and celebrated people had stayed at the hotel or dined in its restaurant that it fired her imagination, making her not only think of things she had read about, but also wonder who she might see there tonight. Yardley had a glimpse of Sophie's profile in that attitude. He thought her beautiful, fresh-faced, and, in that second, very young-looking and charming in her unguarded moment. Her cap was a soft, dark brown velvet with a long tassel, and looked like an artist's oversized beret. Her long, sweeping, mid-brown woolen coat hid a dark blue evening gown, created by Mrs. Green, the Burgoyne agency's preferred couturier. When Sophia tried it on in the Spartan dressing rooms in Brick Lane, Mrs. Green said it was as if she had designed the gown with Sophie in mind, so well did it suit and become her. By some process, which Sophie could only assume included divination, Flora and Ada had guessed that Sophie was to meet Mr. Yardley, and had then extracted from her that she was going to dinner with him at the Savoy. This had occurred because he had diverged from their agreed-upon agenda by telephoning Sophie at her office instead of writing. Yardley had furthered his outrageous behaviour by suggesting they have a quiet dinner together, instead of the originally proposed meeting in a general setting with others present. Sophie, for once forgetting to upbraid him, had surprisingly said yes. Once they learned of the dinner, Ada and Flora decided they should be involved too. In the afternoon at White Lion Yard, Sophie's long brown hair was first brushed and then clasped into place by Flora, who used her very pretty silver and turquoise comb, shaped like a resplendent crown. Use of the hair comb was possible because Flora's jewels had yet to be returned to her pawnbroker for safekeeping. Ada had ensured that Sophie was turned out to the highest standard possible, while giving pointers to Mary, Sophie's maid, courtesy of Aunt Bessie, as she did so. The matter of make-up was a joint decision by the agents. The result, comprising a light application of powder, a dark pink lipstick, faintly penciled eyebrows, the merest suggestion of kohl, and a faint blush of rouge on Sophie's cheeks, met with approval of all three. At the time of Sophie's final inspection, Aunt Bessie approved of everything, and lent Sophie a triple string of pearls and a small black beaded evening bag to complete her ensemble. Turning to practical matters when her niece was ready, Aunt Bessie said that Sophie should find out what income Yardley had at present, and what he would have when he became Viscount Rainmore. A sharp interchange between niece and aunt followed, but was thankfully cut short by the arrival of the taxi. After Aunt Bessie had met the well-mannered and confident Mr. Yardley, her opinion of him founded itself upon a surer and brighter footing. After the taxi drove away, she said as much to Flora, who agreed with her. "You look radiant and fabulous," said St. John, as he and Sophie sat together at a quiet table in the Savoy Grill. Unused to such compliments, Sophie felt it was absurd for him to say these things and came close to laughing. Instead, she smiled and replied, "That's very nice of you. We both look rather different tonight than at our prior meetings."
"True. The maid and the gardener, what? They wouldn't have let me in, of course. But you, I think they would."
"There were other outfits of yours, too. I notice that there is quite a relaxed standard of both dress and conduct here. There's a woman I can see who is still wearing her overcoat while eating, and another woman is smoking."
"I believe it has been like that from the start. The grill is popular with several quite different sets of people. The wealthy clientele staying at the hotel come from many nations. Artists and writers frequent the place at lunchtime. Actors and actresses arrive late at night. Then there's the theatre crowd rush. Also, politicians and businessmen of every type drop in at all hours. So all those various groups have shaped the standards set by the management."
"Yes, I can see they would." Sophie looked around the room. St. John noticed a puzzled look appear on her face.
"Is there anything the matter?"
"Well, this type of place is all rather new to me. But what I notice in particular is that many of the women have their hair cut short."
"Isn't that the latest fashion?"
he asked. "It is, but I hadn't realized until now how prevalent it's become."
"Are you thinking of bobbing your hair?"
"No, I don't think I will. I've never really followed fashions. Couldn't afford to." She laughed. "Besides, some, not many, but some ladies who hire servants stipulate no bobbed hair."
"Do they indeed? Short hair is very practical. Everyone in the services has their hair bobbed."
They both smiled. "Not like those old photographs from the last century," said Sophie, "when men had such long hair and beards, even some officers.
And going back further, don't forget wigs and braids. I couldn't sport the long-haired look." He touched his thick, wavy, pale hair. "My thatch becomes quite unruly over a certain length, so it has to be kept short."
Sophie watched him make the careless action, and then noticed, or rather noticed again, the scar along his jaw. She had seen it before, of course, and now wondered how he had come by it. She also remembered he had walked with a bit of a limp when she first met him, but had not seen him do so since. Behind him, she saw a figure bearing down upon their table. "The waiter's coming," whispered Sophie, repressing an unexpected mild panic over how to order dinner in such a restaurant.
"What would you like?" asked St. John. "I can recommend the Chateaubriand."
While waiting for their dinner, they talked about their respective families.
"The title of Viscount Rainmore was created in 1690, began Yardley, "after Colonel John Yardley deserted James II in favour of William, Prince of Orange. Hardly a reputable basis for a title, I know. He went on to perform a few notable exploits and provide indispensable services for the new king and queen, for which he received a large estate with a ruined house along with the title. Fortunately, John Yardley had some money, and built a rather rambling but altogether comfortable manor house north of Worthing. We're absolutely buried in the country."
"It sounds lovely. Lord John did choose the winning side, and rightly so," said Sophie. "It was one thing to be Catholic or Protestant, but for King James to suspend Parliament for 3 years and rule by decree was reprehensible. In my opinion, he made a short-sighted step backwards."
"Yes, he did, and it would gratify Colonel John to hear you say so."
St. John paused, and looked uncomfortable before resuming.
"I mentioned to Mother that I was meeting you tonight. This is rather awkward, and I attach no importance to it myself, yet I confess to being curious. She asked about your family. And for my part, where does Lady Shelling fit into the scheme of things? She is your aunt?"
"Yes, she is. The Burgoyne family has a long history." Sophie explained her immediate family, and then its connection to ancient French kings and the Dukes of Burgundy.
"Quite fascinating. Then, by rights, and had you escaped the French Revolution, you would either be a princess or the daughter of a duke. That should buck Mother up no end."
"Mr. Yardley? St. John, is not the cart before the horse?"
"My apologies, and it is most definitely so. Mother is very concerned about the title. For her, family is of the utmost importance. She asked me to ask you. Please excuse my impertinence."
Sophie did not like to say what was of utmost importance to Aunt Bessie. What would she have said if my family had been otherwise?
"She would be put out, but it makes no difference to me."
"And your father?"
"You only need discuss potatoes with father, and he will become your friend for life."
Sophie laughed. "Is he really so devoted to agriculture?"
"Yes, he is. When the weather is more pleasant, you must come down and meet him to find out in person."
"I could further ingratiate myself with Lord Rainmore with a little family history."
"Oh, can you? Tell me about it."
He looked relaxed and interested. "Yes, we had a barony once, but lost it. Lord Giles Burgoyne had an estate in the Buddlesgate Hundred near Winchester. I saw the house years ago, and I've always thought to get it back one day. A childhood fancy, and only that. He built it in 1620, and by 1636 there was only a small mortgage remaining. Unfortunately, that was when he became enamoured of tulips and sought to improve the family's fortunes. He remortgaged the property to its fullest extent upon ruinous terms. Then he visited Holland twice to buy tulip bulb contracts. He went for the second time in February 1637, and that was his undoing. Lord Giles stayed at a tavern outside Haarlem, because, as he discovered upon landing, the city was shut up with an outbreak of the plague. Having fortified himself with copious amounts of Geneva, Dutch gin, against the cold and against the plague, he set off for a nearby tulip bulb auction he had seen advertised in the tavern. Because of the plague, he more or less had the sale to himself, and spent everything he had in buying up good quality stock and many prize specimens for pennies in the pound. Poor thing. From his diaries, it is apparent he had convinced himself on the homeward voyage that he was now the richest man in England, because he had filled his pockets and cases with bulb contracts. However, word of the tulip bulb price collapse had preceded his return to England, and by the time he reached home he knew he was bankrupt. Tulip mania was over, and all the frenzied speculation had ended. Realizing he needed to act quickly, and before the creditors closed in, he sold off the furniture locally for what he could, and then removed his family to Brittany, where he purchased a farmhouse near the village of Colombelle. There he took delivery of a large quantity of the best Dutch tulip bulbs and went to work. He did well over the years in supplying bulbs to notable Parisian gardens. Later on, he branched out into cheese-making and lived to a good old age. The abandoned barony, however, became extinct, and the estate went to the creditors.
"I'm sorry it fell out that way for Lord Giles," said St. John, "although father will greatly appreciate the story. I'm sure the Bretons cherished the colourful sight of Lord Giles's tulip fields."
"I suppose they did," Sophie laughed.
"Quite remarkable. It's marvellous listening to you. Do you have any more stories like that?"
"A few. Continuing in the same vein, we Burgoynes are very good at losing titles. After Giles re-established the family's fortunes in France, his son, Sebastian Burgoyne, was made a vicomte and received lands in Normandy. He then married into a noble Guyenne family. At the end of the century, Sebastian's grandson, Arnaud, inherited the title of the Marquis de Mimazan. Of course, we lost both titles and estates during the Revolution. That disaster the Burgoynes avoided by emigrating to England in 1789, before things got really bad.
I'm heartily glad that your family did so. May I relay a little of this information to my mother? I won't steal your thunder and repeat your stories, because, should you get to tell her them yourself, you will have her spellbound.
Of course you may. I'm well aware of the importance placed by many people upon one's heritage. It shouldn't really matter, though, should it?
Ah, no, I don't think it should either, St. John smiled. The fact is, it does in our circle. However, as the influence of the aristocracy diminishes, it is quite apparent that the influence of celebrities, for example, is in the ascendant, and filling in the void.
That immediately makes me think of a certain person who manages to be both an aristocrat and a celebrity.
St. John stared at her. We should try to avoid talking shop, or we'll be here until sunrise and accomplish little.
I quite agree. I only pointed him out as one who has transitioned into new areas of influence.
Yes, that's true. And heaven help us should Stokely ever make a move into radio broadcasting when it matures. We'll have to put up with the sound of his wretched voice in addition to him grinning and posturing in photographs.
Miss Carmichael refers to him as the big boat race. That's Cockney rhyme for face.
It is a very apt expression. She's quite a friend of yours, I think.
She is. And Len? With a certain archness in her tone, Sophie was referring to Yardley's chauffeur.
Oh, yes. Unfortunately, I cannot satisfy your curiosity as to why I have a chauffeur who insists on being called by his given name. Here comes the food.
You do not get off that easily, said Sophie. I will find out. St. John smiled. After they had finished their dinner, they were on the point of adjourning to the Lancaster ballroom to dance. A new ensemble had just started its tenure on the first day of the new year, and already, by the 5th of January, the Savoy Havana Band was being mentioned in glowing terms. Sophie was an indifferent dancer. Even after having been coached by Flora and practicing with Ada, she had only reached the heights of minimal adequacy. She thoroughly hoped that St. John was a poorer dancer than she was. However, Sophie did not get the chance to find out. A note was delivered in a sealed envelope to Yardley as they sat at the table. She could tell it was important by his studious look as he read the missive. At last he looked up.
I am so dreadfully sorry.
A mission?
Yet again, I'm afraid it is, Sophie.
He sighed heavily. Can't be helped, she said, disappointed, but with some relief at not having to dance.
I'll have to make amends for this somehow.
They both then noticed a second waiter approaching the table, bearing another envelope on a silver tray.
Perhaps the orders have been countermanded, said Yardley.
He was nonplussed when the man approached Sophie instead.
Are you Miss King? Asked the waiter.
I am she. Sophie tried to hide her surprise. He held out the tray and she picked up the envelope. When the waiter had gone, she opened it. Oh, it seems I've been called away too. Care to swap notes?
We can't. Standing orders and all that.
But supposing it's the same mission, we could discuss it.
Absolutely not.
Spoil sport. St. John, thank you very much for such a lovely dinner. I enjoyed our talk, and the food was simply superb.
I'm so pleased. Dining with you has been most interesting, and a thorough delight. It's such a pity that outside forces should bring the evening to such an abrupt end. Excuse me a moment.
He turned away to summon a waiter. It was Archie who had summoned Sophie from the Savoy. He was awaiting her return in the drawing-room at White Lion Yard. He and Aunt Bessie were sitting comfortably, chatting and drinking sherry, when Sophie entered the room. Archie got up.
My abject apologies for interfering with your evening, he said.
Rest assured, you are not the only interferer, replied Sophie. St. John received a note too. Is it the same business? Archie hesitated.
Possibly. I wonder, Bessie, if you would excuse us for a moment? It's rather important.
Out of the question. I wish to observe these cloak and dagger proceedings, and I forbid you to use another room. We're trapped, said Sophie, who sat down. Say what you can, but do let Auntie hear a juicy bit, for goodness sake.
I happen to be still in the room, Sophie, said Aunt Bessie with mock indignation. However, she's perfectly correct. Make it good and juicy, Archibald. He sighed. Very well, but this must go no further than these walls. He sat down and smiled at her.
Aunt Bessie smiled back.
Through information received, it is becoming apparent that Lord Stokely is planning something on a large scale, and is presently putting in the necessary groundwork. I can't go into all the details, even if you were not present, Bessie, but the upshot of his activities seems to be this. He wants to foment a general strike. His mode of operation is to supply cash to union representatives and, in essence, convert them into being his agents. The 6 union agents so far identified hold a wide range of political opinion, from far left to the right of the trade union movement. Yes?
Sophie had put her hand up. I have 2 questions, she said. If you don't answer one of them, I probably won't understand what you're saying.
Go ahead.
What do you mean by to the right of the trade union movement?
Ah, yes. These are men who are very much invested in improving working conditions and wages for their union members, but desire few or only limited changes in the governance and laws of the country. The far left, by contrast, wishes to install an entirely new regime and jettison everything else.
Oh, I see. Improve the current system versus a new system. Please, continue.
What was your other question?
Well, I was just wondering how you and the Foreign Office are involved. Isn't this a Home Office matter?
Naturally, it is. If I may, I'll answer how the FO came to be involved in just a few moments, and why I sent for you with such urgency.
Thank you.
Look, Archibald, I'm on the very edge of my seat here, said Aunt Bessie, so get on with it. Archie ignored her comment. Stokely's union agents are not particularly interesting because of their politics. What is of interest is that these agents are in certain key industries. 2 of them belong to the Miners' Federation of Great Britain, and 1 each in the National Union of Railwaymen, the Associated Society of Locomotive Engineers and Firemen.
Archie tapped his forehead in remembering the names.
The National Union of Dock Labourers, and the National Union of Printing and Paper Workers.
That, said Aunt Bessie, is the most depressing assortment of words I have ever heard uttered in a drawing-room. Do you require a headache powder or a stiff drink?
I'll survive, thank you. If his agents are being primed to act in concert, it will be seen that there is the potential to cause another railway strike, close the mines, hold up imports and exports, and selectively control what gets printed in the newspapers. Now, a few individuals in his pay are unlikely to have much effect. However, if and as Stokely recruits more agents, we might have a better understanding of what his intentions are.
Sophie's hand went up again.
Yes?
How do you know they are Stokely agents, and how did you find out?
Good questions. This work comes from another department upon whose activities I cannot comment, even if I were familiar with them. My guess is that they have noticed the union agents being in possession of some extra money. Whether it was made evident by a change in their habits or by their paying money to others, I do not know. The sources, I'm told, are reliable, and the money traces back to a Stokely associate. Now, Bessie, here comes the juicy part, which may tie in with the recruiting of union agents. We were alerted at the FO when an ordinary individual named Arthur Brooke, age 31, entered the country 2 days ago. The reason he drew our attention is that, although he is a British subject, he has been working in Italy as a freelance journalist for the last 6 months, during which time he has maintained close associations with the Fasci Italiani di Combattimento. Roughly translated, it means the League of Italian Fighting Bands, which, I'm sad to say, is an apposite description of the League's activities. The targets for their violence are competing political parties and any detractors of their movement. Several of Brooke's reports from Italy have been printed in Stokely's newspapers. They were favourable to the fascisti and downplay any violence and illegal dealings. I know he has minimised those elements for a fact, because it so happens I have a mild curiosity in Italy at present. Archie smiled briefly. Had that been all, we would have no further interest in Brooke. However, the gentleman dropped a clangor. Brooke mentioned conversationally to someone who was taking more than a passing interest in him, shall we say, that he was going to attend Lord Stokely's birthday party in Belgravia next week. Aunt Bessie put up her hand this time. "He's more important than he looks, isn't he?" she asked. "We believe so, but we're not sure how." "But if Brooke is invited to Countess Stokely's party for her son," said Sophie, "then either she knows Brooke directly and the party could still be a surprise one, or Stokely knows all about the celebration and had Brooke deliberately included in the list." Archie shook his head. "It is almost inconceivable that she knows Arthur Brooke unless she is directly involved in Stokely's schemes." "Oh, no, she's not," said Aunt Bessie. "She's not the type. The Countess is that brainless, doting type of mother who believes her foul son to be a gift from the gods. If any family member is involved in Stokely's schemes, it's his uncle, Edward Fielding. Stokely calls him Uncle Teddy, sees him at least once a week, and is always sending him stamps for his collection." Sophie and Archie stared at Aunt Bessie. How did you acquire such information?" asked Archie. "You have your agents, Sophie has hers, and I have mine. I'm not going to divulge any of their names. There are too many of them anyway." Sophie stifled a laugh. "Come on, Bessie," said Archie. "You needn't give away your sources, but how do you come to know? Is it friends of friends, that sort of thing?" "I'm not telling, but any information I advance shall be as trustworthy as the Bank of England." "I'm not dismissing or belittling what you say." "No, you're not, because I shan't give you the chance. You're a busy fellow, and I like you. But I can find out things your agents, who can only show a passing interest, will miss entirely. You have no conception of the vast reservoir of information about titled families I can tap into. Now, it is not encyclopedic, and of course some families are extraordinarily private, but not the Stokeleys." "Then, Auntie," asked Sophie, "what is your opinion upon Mr. Brooke's inclusion in the party guest list?" "Thank you, my dear. I would say Stokely is aware of the party and asked his mother to include this Brooke fellow, simply because Stokely wishes to show favouritism to the man for a job well done." Aunt Bessie and Sophie looked at Archie. "That is an entirely plausible scenario," he said. "It also agrees with the estimate of Brooke's character. His reported candour and overall friendly tone means he does not think of himself as an agent, and, by all accounts, seemed not to be concealing anything. Also, if Brooke was bringing vital news, Stokely would not delay seeing him until the party. He would see him immediately." Archie stood up and began to pace. "The urgency, Sophie, is that we need a list of the guests. Obtaining it beforehand has become a must with this odd inclusion of Mr. Brooke. Our idea is that Stokely may also invite some of his current inner circle. Should he do so, it would be rather a coup to get their names ahead of time. We can start our investigations much earlier, you see. Do you think you can manage it?" "Let me see. I would need a good reason to ask for a list of names from the butler.
Dietary considerations and preferences might do it. I'll say I need...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?